I'm Chris Arredondo, co-founder and VP of pretty much everything customer related here at Cargo Chief. We're a freight tech company where we solve some of the industry's biggest issues, not just when it comes to capacity, but sporadic capacity, and not just the inaccuracies and volatility of the market, but also pricing in that aspect through our platform called C4. Most people that come to us, companies, brokerages, are looking to rely less on load boards, have a better procurement strategy, even when it comes to carrier reuse and carrier retention, and automate some of the legwork it takes to actually book that freight. All that plus a better way to price out freight. C4 is an automation and procurement platform that's really going to give you the quickest path to get options and keep that freight moving. This is a short list of some of the TMSs that we're integrated with, and some of them range from our automation side with digital freight matching, where some of the others here, like TIE TMS logistically, really provide an all-in-one solution. I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through the demo today. I think some things to think about overall and through the session are probably the opportunities you're getting, or maybe those that you're missing out on, whether it was today, last week, last month, or even potential opportunities in the future, or those that you could be taking if you actually started winning every load. When it comes down to that and those opportunities, some things that really to phrase sort of like where you are in your journey is to think about coverage, your coverage strategy, your pricing strategy, what tools you're using today, and what that's actually going to solve for. Then through the day-to-day or even long-term or even in the next year, what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing and what are you doing to sort of overcome those and what are you looking to do? When it comes to coverage, thinking about, how much spot freight do you have? Are you posting a ton of your freight? Are you doing a lot of one and done transactions where you're never really tapping into the carrier pool that you've already spent 10, 30 minutes onboarding? Do you actually have a strategy there? Then is there a centralized place for your team to come to recall those core carriers quickly, whether it's, core carriers, relationship carriers, or even carriers you set up last week? Is there a place for you to come to quickly queue those up when you need them? Then what actually goes into covering a load? Is there a ton of time? Is it chaotic? What does that coverage strategy look like? Are you sort of limited in some of the databases that you have? Or are you really sort of isolated and siloed just to your own network? The next piece is really your pricing strategy. What are you doing differently? Whether it's the buy side or coverage side, what are you doing differently to price more competitively from the next company down the street? Then how long is it taking you to figure out what those rates should be, either for new quotes or even negotiating with carriers? What actually goes in to that pricing strategy and that process? The other piece is what tools are you using today? Sometimes it's really just about process improvements where, the traditional ways of sourcing for carriers isn't always the best way. It's not really tapping into real-time data. So maybe thinking about the processes that you use today or tools that you're using to help you with that. Is it tools to help you with carrier expansion or tripling your coverage? Or are there tools to help you book more freight? One of our partners here, HubTech, has a sort of a tabby bot that, allows their customers to really automatically quote business out and actually win that freight, reducing a lot of the emotion and the legwork it takes to actually win that business. Then thinking of, an overall picture, what tools are you using today to grow your business and drive your revenue? Then when it comes to sort of the challenges, what I said earlier, most people come to us to rely less on load boards, reduce the time it takes to book freight, and make more money. Let's face it, at the end of the day, the two things that are universal is time and money. And if you can save time, make more money, everything's gonna sort of drive off from there. Gonna walk into the actual product here. I want to take you to sort of the end goal here rather than walking through sort of the different bits and pieces. Ideally, this is what you'll be looking at. When I mentioned, the quickest path to getting options to keep freight moving, in an ideal world, this is what that looks like. And whether the integration is all done on the back end where you're just working in your TMS and your inbox, that's really what we push. We don't quite push people to an application, although there is that capability if you ever wanted to come to C4 and do different things here that we have. But here on the right side is really your activity log, counter offers from carriers that are set up in your network that can run this freight that fits their business, and it's all automated. Nobody had to spend time sending out emails. C4 did it for you. Nobody had to spend time calling carriers. C4 drives that traffic in for you with carriers that are already set up with you that fit our database. So the next click is really just accepting a carrier, sending them the rate confirmation, all done through your TMS. Wouldn't that be great, right? If you just had options coming through, whittling through all the phone calls and all the legwork it takes to actually get an option. That's sort of the goal here, and that's what we're going to help you do. Now I'm going to walk you through how we do it. C4 is really broken into, I'd say, probably 3 parts here, or maybe 4. There's a capacity engine, pricing engine, procurement, then there's automation. The first leg here with capacity, and again, we have a couple integrations with my carrier packets straight to your TMS, where we keep qualifications really up to date with what you guys are doing on your end. As you qualify carriers, dequalify carriers, your C4 database is going to stay in sync with that. Now, these days, double brokering is a big topic that seems to be out there. We do some sort of compliance pre-qualification processes in the beginning to make sure that we're not actually pushing load offers out to other brokers. I think one of the risks with load boards is when you post a load out there, you don't really know who's looking at your freight. There could be, several people that are viewing it and just sort of entertaining options, or worst case, they're coming in, they see that same lane and they're going to go and undercut you somehow. The other thing is when you post a load out there, it could be Atlanta to Lakeland in this case, where your load's posted at 1,100. Somebody else, there's 10 other loads with other postings that say 1,200, 1,300, 1,400. And when your carriers are calling in, you're all of a sudden inflating the market without actually knowing that you did. And that's usually when you end up with a $1,500 option. So we could talk about all the risks with load boards, but here in C4, we try to do a fairly decent job at making sure that the carriers that are actually going to be engaging with you are the right ones. They're not just ghost trucks, if you will, or just carriers that aren't really interested in doing business with you. In C4, what we do and how we build this capacity out, I'll take Southwind Transportation for an example here. Most people are keeping track of carrier information, sometimes in their TMS, where they have sort of like a load history under Southwind Transportation, and that's sometimes how they're reaching out to these other carriers. Another way is through Excel spreadsheets or notepads or whatever else it could be out there. One of the drawbacks I'd say to that is it's really targeted or isolated to just your network. There's not really a way to capture other data from other loads that these carriers are actually running. In the example, Southwind Transportation, you might only know the top 2 to 3 lanes that you're running with them. And that's really just because that's the only freight you've had. It could be Houston to Atlanta, or maybe Chicago to Columbus or something, maybe top 2 lanes. As these carriers start to book loads in the C4 network, those lanes start to aggregate and build out a carrier profile that allows you to leverage those other lanes that these carriers are running. In Southwind Transportation, let's say they had 50 trucks and you guys are only booking 1 lane, 1 corridor with that carrier, maybe 1 or 2 trucks that's dedicated to you. They're doing business with somebody else for those other 48 trucks. And what C4 allows you to do is, as this carrier books loads, it could be Atlanta to Lakeland, LA to Seattle, Jersey to Buffalo, whatever other lanes that are going on. We're processing roughly 250,000 loads a month. As these carriers start to book freight, those lanes start to come up. And what that allows you to do is leverage that carrier's entire routing network rather than just those top 2-3 lanes that you're typically doing. And a good example here is if you go from a cell phone carrier like Boost Mobile or Cricket, maybe a lower end cell phone carrier, then you're switching to Verizon, you're pretty much 10xing your coverage. And that's sort of the idea here in terms of coverage and how you're able to really start to drive booking rates and get the right carrier engagement to come to you rather than spending all that time trying to just make 60 phone calls off a load board that doesn't ever come to fruition. So here in C4, what we'll do is give you sort of that lane by lane breakdown. You can always click into a carrier profile, see different contact information. You can rate conversations on these carriers. You can leave notes for carriers, create tasks, and assign them to projects, which I'll talk about in a moment, and actually look into the full profile for that carrier and see the lanes that these carriers are actually taking. If it's on reefers, vans, flatbeds, whatever sort of equipment type, we're processing that data. Back to this carrier card, there's a chance that maybe you don't have that many carriers. What we'll actually give you too is access to the entire database of carriers, allowing you to really expand your network. When I come down here, these carriers here in this bold text network icon, those are carriers set up with you guys. The carriers in standard text are carriers that are beyond what's just in your own network. Popular demo lane here, but if I click on a second page, you can see a lot more carriers that are not set up with you, but run this lane at some degree of frequency. With our My Carrier Packets integration, you can actually send them this one-click button, and that'll shoot over a packet to these carriers. If you do have a My Carrier Packets subscription, the C4 database will also stay up to date with your My Carrier Packets carriers as they're onboarding with you guys. So there's never a point where you have to continue to upload carrier databases. We do that connection directly either with your TMS or with My Carrier Packets. And we'll talk about the pricing engine here. The difference really in the way that we look at rates is a forecast prediction of the market and where it's going. Most of the other rating tools out there are probably going to be 7 to 14 days delayed after the load's been delivered. When you think of like a lane, even in this example, a trip that's 450 miles, could be a day, maybe 2 days at the most, but people right now are booking freight for today, tomorrow, next week, next month, where after that load gets processed and delivered, it's already been, 7 days after delivery, but it was booked 2 days before it actually got picked up. So there's even a longer delay there that doesn't really get included into the rate, or it's not often talked about because of the wide delay. The other piece are load postings. A lot of the other rating tools take in sort of load postings. We both know probably here that you post a load at 1100, probably didn't go for 1100. That means there's going to be an even bigger skew between the rate that you're looking at and what the market's actually doing. For us, what we do is as soon as those loads get booked, we process that transaction immediately. And that allows us to have a better dial on where that market's going based on the pickup dates. When you look into the recent transactions table, you'll actually be able to see a breakdown of freight that's actually getting booked based on pickup dates here. So when you look into this table, you have a little bit more insight, whether it's for a customer rep or a carrier rep. If you guys get a new quote coming at you and your customer says, hey, can you do 1,500? And you see here that a load's been booked at 1,650 for pickup on the 6th, maybe not. If you look a little further, maybe 2 days ago, you might have been able to do 1,500. And it just gives you a little bit more insight into that decision-making process. Not just that, but you can also use lane density as a factor here. If it's the carrier buy side, maybe the point here when you're negotiating with carriers is I've got 120 carriers at my disposal that can take it at a certain rate, giving you a little bit more buying power whenever you are negotiating with carriers or even with customers too. You can break this list down into just your network too, to where you can see how strong your buying power is there at your company to give you a little bit more insight for that decision, whether it's taking a load or not. The next piece here that I want to talk about is the projects function. This is really when I was talking about the opportunities that you could be missing out on. Projects is a really good way to bring everything together. Those lanes that maybe you bid on last week, didn't win for whatever reason, or maybe it's new freight that's coming up, or maybe it's current freight that you've already got, but you're really just trying to tighten the belts on whether it's margin, maybe it's higher pay for carriers, lower prices for shippers to help you win more volume. There's a lot of different ways that you can use projects here in C4. Most of our integrations don't have a projects API, but you can access this in C4. And one thing for C4 is it really allows for two user groups. Those people, brokers that don't want to leave their TMS. They just want to work right in their TMS in their inbox. And that's certainly what you can do. Part of the integrations allow for that, to where you're not actually having to come to an application. The other part where most people come to the C4 platform is for projects, scorecards, or even just the pricing tools if their integration doesn't have that. So there's a very tight use case here for people that do want to come to the application that we definitely help you with through the onboarding. Back to projects, what this is going to be, your lane, your OD pair breakdown. I'm going to hop into one of these that we've built before. It's really your origin, your destination. You can set trailer types, different volumes, if it's like 50 a week to a month, whatever that is. So here in projects, one thing that we'll do is show you a recommended list of carriers. It's pretty much the same thing on that capacity list, but in a more centralized location. If you find a carrier in C4, you can click them with that button, procure, add a rate if you had one, or if you didn't have one, you can start to build this list out. And one of the drawbacks of a lot of TMS is you don't really have a way to associate a carrier lead to certain lanes unless you've actually hauled freight with that carrier. What C4 does is, and this scenario happens all the time where you post a load, you've got 10 carriers on queue that are calling in, you answer the phone and you say that load's covered, and that's the end of the conversation. With C4, what you can actually do to tap into roughly 600,000 carriers, come here, maybe ask for their name, ask for their MC or whatever thing you want to ask for there. Let's just say it was Centauri calls in and they're interested in the load that I've got. The conversation is much different when you can say, hey, yeah, that load's covered, but let me add you to that project next time I get it, and I'll reach out to you. So now you just toggle that carrier lead onto a project, and you're not missing that opportunity that could come up next week, next month, or whenever you do actually have that freight. With one click, you can actually send out an email to all the carriers in your procured list. This more or less helps you stage that capacity, keep those conversations going. And typically what the emails are is we can really customize it to whatever you want, but the email will go out and it's really going to say like, hey, you said you're interested in this lane. Curious what kind of rate you have. Do you have any trucks? And it's really a good way to keep things centralized, ways to communicate with your carriers without having to make several phone calls, type up individual emails. It's just a much better way to streamline a lot of things and be a lot more efficient. I'm gonna hop over to the automation piece and back to the screen that I showed you in the beginning, the goal, getting you more options and helping you guys book freight. How we actually do that, and this is with most of our integrations here, based on whatever criteria we set, there's a lot of configuration on the back end where we don't want to make people click buttons. And how we do that is really configuration according to how you guys book freight. We can trigger load offers out based on different customer codes. We can exclude certain carriers. There's a lot of things that we can do to make sure that loads that are being automated are actually going to drive engagement. Most people that are coming to us trying to get away from load boards, they're probably posting 60% of their freight or so. The goal for us is to reduce that number of freight that they're posting and push that through automation so that way they can start to do more business with their existing carriers rather than spending 30 minutes each carrier onboarding just to find out that they're never going to use them again. So what we'll do in the integration setup, we'll pull your load number, we'll pull the commodity. One of the unique things here is actually our rating calculation. Since we have our own pricing engine, we can do a couple things on the rating side that automates a lot of the guesswork, I would say. We can take your max buys, we can take your target pays and push those rates out if that's what you're using. We can also cross-calculate against your customer rate. If you've got $2,000 in the load and you want to make 25% margin and you want to push that out for carriers to look at or book, then we can certainly do that and automate everything. We can also do some cross calculations where if your target pay is $1,800 and the market rate that we've got is picking up on $1,468, we can actually supersede that rate and push out our price to the carriers that are looking at your freight. So where now clearly there's more room for margin and improvements. 99% of the time, carriers are probably going to counter back. So this gives you a way to hit where the market is, but still also try to drive some improvement on more margin. And all that's done through the onboarding and implementation side. The weight here, we'll pull that straight from your TMS, any pickup dates, times, special instructions. If there's planning comments, dispatch comments, whatever it is, we'll pull that through. Now looking at The screen, everything happens in the back end, again, where nobody has to come to C4. All of this is going to be configured based on whatever criteria we set. If you're in pods, we can route all the email communication back to your team, where if somebody's working in a certain region or certain customer codes, we can push the carrier replies back to those people specifically. So everybody's not sort of looking at everything and cherry picking things. So through this process, we'll customize your templates as well for these load offers that go out. Generally, what it's going to look like is this. The goal for us is to get a carrier to open the email. It doesn't really matter what's in it if they don't open it. So we make some of these emails look very personalized, where it looks like it's coming from a human rather than a system. So we'll say state to state, any trucks. We'll put things here inside of the email like, hey, Damien, or whoever that contact is. Slow just popped up. Here's the rates and the details of your load. We'll brand this with your logo, the right person, the right phone numbers, the right email addresses, anything that the carrier needs in order to communicate with you. Our open rates on average are roughly 60%. It's something that we really push for, deliverability, where there's often not really any tools out there that tell you what your open rates are, what your engagement rates are with your email traffic or your email campaigns, which we monitor all that for you. The goal is to help drive those numbers up. So an open rate of about 60%. The next thing down the funnel is a reply rate, which is roughly 40% of the time. What carriers typically do is they're going to reply and say, like, can you do 1600, or send it over, or hey, I don't have anybody today. Can it pick up on Friday, or send it over, or hey, I don't have anybody. Whatever sort of communication these carriers are doing today, that's more than likely what you're going to be getting, just at a higher volume. The reply rate, again, is about 40%. So just under half of your freight is what you could expect in carrier traffic and carrier replies coming straight to your team, rather than having to go send individual emails, go and call a carrier. C4 will do it all for you. The next thing down the line is the action, which carriers can click this book now button. If you're on certain TMSs, there's actually a way for carriers to click book now. That will actually assign the carrier to the load. The next thing is you can actually toggle that execution in an automated way as well. So depending on the TMS, will sort of dictate what capabilities there are for the book now options. Alternatively, if the carrier clicks this button, it'll actually drive them right to this unique landing page tied back to that carrier's MC/DOT email, to where we're not actually giving a carrier a load board. We're not making them sign up for anything. We're reducing as much friction as possible and linking things right to the exact landing page for that carrier. So rather than carriers having to go search for freight or sign up for another load board, we're reducing that friction and allowing them to engage with you just as they're used to doing today. So if a carrier wants to book now, they can click that button if that TMS integration allows for that. The other piece is they can actually counter back. So if they click 1600 and they click that counter button, two things will happen. Most of our integrations will have a bid screen or an offer screen, where that offer will go straight to your TMS, where your users don't actually have to come to C4. They can just work right through their TMS. You'll also get notifications here that will look something like this if a carrier counters back to you guys. So you guys can work with those carriers as you wish. This is usually where the buck stops, where most people are calling these carriers or countering back through email, sending them the rate con, but they're also getting truck number, driver number, truck trailer, empty times, empty locations, making sure they've got wood floors and whatnot. And that's really what we're doing, where we're not replacing humans. We're actually maintaining the human interaction, but pushing people closer to that point of negotiation where the skill is. The skill isn't in how many calls can I make, how many emails can I send. It's really in that negotiation piece. And when you're able to free up your team to do more of that, that's always going to have much more positive results. The other piece is when you think of like a culture standpoint, or even hiring, a lot of companies are growing still, or even current companies that are just trying to retain good employees. When you put technology in front of them that helps them with their job, helps them make more money, helps them save time, puts a little bit of order to the chaos where it's not so frantic every day, that's going to start to build a different culture in a more positive way. It's going to give them a little bit more reasons to use technology to book freight without changing their behavior. And even when you talk about new hires, it gives them a much better way to be more successful in the beginning rather than waiting 5, 10 years to actually build carrier relationships, where C4 is going to help you with that procurement angle, but also drive that carrier attention. Most customers, I would say, depending on the integration, see immediate value, whether it's day one or depending on the TMS, could be through the onboarding process. One of the things that we really do with our subscriptions is unlimited users, so you don't have that burden of who can use the tool. We try to push company-wide adoption and collaboration because there's different ways that you can use C4. From a customer rep standpoint, you can price out freight, you can push RFPs through in bulk templates if you wanted, and really start to attack those mini bids rather than doing things one at a time. The other piece is, depending on the integration, you could have everything of C4 right into your TMS with one subscription, and it makes it a lot more flexible to where you're signing up for something and it's going to take 6 months down the line to actually get it going. You'll have immediate access to C4 that's going to help drive company growth. Some other things when it comes down to booking rates, most of our customers see roughly 8 to 10% of their freight getting booked through C4 in more of a digital fashion, where some customers, depending on how long you've been with us, could be up to like 23% or so. So it really depends on carrier retention, the reliance that you're looking to shift away from load boards, and how much of automation you really want to push. And we try to help people go in sort of steps rather than just like doing everything automated. It's really customized to your brokerage. So through the onboarding process, you'll have a live customer success manager, tons of training, tons of materials. We take care of all the integration fees. So if there's ever an integration with any of your TMS that has a cost, we take care of that for you. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. And I've got a Get Freight to It shirt here. Check out one of our podcast episodes. We'll be pushing out a ton more episodes here coming up. So if you want to hear more about us talking with some of your TMS partners, I think we've had McLeod on there, Thai TMS, 3PL Systems and Brokerware, as well as a couple others and our customers too. Feel free to check that out and learn a little bit more about what's going on in the industry. So with that, we're going to wrap up here, and thank you everybody for joining today. Y'all have a good week.